food from a lens of hunger, food from a lens of sovereignty, or whatever that might be. But it's a time for us to put our minds, our attention, our thoughts on what's happening in the world of food. Now, granted, in the world of BYI, we do this, fairly regularly. However, we want to make sure that that we align ourselves with the global struggle, right? So while we might call it Independence Day, and we've been doing this for several years, we want to also acknowledge World Food Day. All right, so that's important because we are a part of a global struggle, right? This is not because we are unfortunately inheritance of global oppression, food and land-based oppression. And so those of us who wish to struggle, we struggle when we acknowledge this day as one to hopefully learn about those who have been and discontinued for whatever reason, who've been and continued through, or those who are starting struggle to push against some of those food regimes that oppress our people, oppress the land, the planet, and all things in between. So I want to, lift it up in that way and just acknowledge that today we are. Let me back up. My fault. I'm Brother Eric. I know everybody knows that, but Brother Eric, Black Youth Institute Servant Director. Outside of this space, outside of this meeting, I would be EJ from Cherry Hill. But for now, you know what I mean. I got my threads on, and so certain things I will or won't say. I'm joking. I'm gonna be me everywhere I go. And in doing so, that's it. I appreciate it. You know what? I believed you because I had the tinglies. I tell you, yeah. Anyway, I felt you feeling it when you said what you said. You know what I mean? It came up. I want to share something personal. Can I do that?
Yeah.
So, 6 years ago, on this day, actually, we had finished our first Independence Day event. At this time, it was in collaboration with Black Church Food Security Network. And no, it wasn't actually, not yet. But we had our first one at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, where Black Church Food Security Network had its offices at the time, and I think still does. And we had a great first event. It was packed. Well, 7 people showed up like we had today. It was a joke. You can laugh at that. You see how I set it up? It was packed. There was one less person anyway. And that very next day, I was in a fire. A fire that changed my life forever. And the trajectory of what we call Black Youth Institute today. I didn't prepare for us any of this. If y'all want to see it, we can do it later because I ain't want it to be graphic or nothing. But I had 2nd-degree burns. I was in the ICU for 6 days after that. But it was the day 6 years ago that I honestly thought that was it. And I ain't trying to be deep or none of that, but it is significant. You know when Bobby Malcolm said, I moved like a person who died already? 6 years ago, I was like, all right, I can do this thing. I thought it was it for real. I'm not even gonna lie. I thought it was it. I was questioning a bunch of stuff, including myself, the viability of BYI and this vision that I felt connected to. But it was on this day 6 years ago that it was like, oh no, I got you. You got some things to experience before you get there. But I just want to acknowledge that a significant event, a significant day in my life, and a significant day that's connected to not only this celebration of Independence Day, but also a certain kind of resonance that happens when we start talking about keep the flame. There's a personal connection that I've got to that. If y'all are interested, I'll show you the pictures, but it's a miraculous shift. Now, don't get me wrong. I still look good, even with the 2nd-degree burns. It's just, I look better now. I'm just playing. Yeah, all right. That's the second joke that didn't go. There we go.
My youngest
We had some
birthday
good
was
ones. We had
And your youngest birthday is
Libra.
today.
today. Yeah, he turned 3 years
Your
ago.
birthday today?
That's why he's firing too.
That's a fact.
So for today's Independence Day, the first of its kind actually, we got a bit of a presentation that we want to share. In what we were planning, it was going to be like a big game, but we're not there. As things have their different timelines and as timelines shift, our foci has to shift. You know what I'm saying? And in this case, what we've shifted for this event is to give a bit of a progress report for what we've called Cherry Hill Food Apartheid Study. All right, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the study, how the study came to be, and then also talk about where we are right now, share a bit of what we've learned, and share a little bit of what we've written and some things that we've learned from community participants in the study. So, y'all ready?
Mm-hmm.
We good?
Yeah.
Get started. We'll have opportunities for question and answer. Kind of did welcomes already. I should say, I think everybody knows, but I think everybody knows. I was going to say, you know how you do like
Icebreaker.
no, not icebreaker. Little housekeeping. You know, the bathrooms are there, food over there. We already did that, so we're gonna move forward. Okay. So we'll talk about Independence Day a little more and make the connection. I kind of did it already. Do some intros. Talk about the research team. We're going to talk about the story of the study, how it came to be, what the aims and methods of the study is, where we are today, what we've learned, and then open it up for any questions and things like that. All right. I mentioned this already, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it. But again, Independence Day, this is our 6th year. Every year since 2016, we've done this. And so the first year was really exciting. We gathered at the church. We had a good little celebration. The idea of Independence Day actually came to me in conversation with a good sister. That's when I first started working on the idea in 2014, actually. It was this idea that, Independence Day, July 4th, 1776, United States of America becomes, independent from the United Kingdom, right? Great Britain, whatever you want to call it, right? That historic history. But we know that African peoples have and continue to be subjugated by this same government since then, right? So you can imagine this country that aims to be or has aimed to maintain independence and then go on to be like this world power that conquers other people. It's like, well, nah, y'all, fuck that, especially in the context of food work. Like, how do we use all the audacity that we have and be audacious enough to say, you know what, we're gonna have an aspirational day. We haven't ended dependence yet, but we want to end dependence on white people and white institutions to feed us. And so this is more so a celebration, a holiday, if you will. Hopefully one day we get important enough it becomes a holiday. We've been doing it for 6 years. Like, how long you gotta, be? I feel like shit, it's our holiday, right? And so the idea is to say, you know what, this is a time to commemorate, to remember, to monumentalize our work toward the end toward the end of being less dependent, of being completely independent from white institutions, white people, and other groups to feed us and tell us, and so forth. So that's the whole idea. It's really just a time to celebrate. We're gonna have this is our first time really doing like a lecture. And it's not even a lecture, it's real progress report, question and answer. And I'm gonna go back to what we usually do on Independence Day, and that's party, cut a rug. We started with some laughing, talking about dumpster diving. Kiana had everybody thinking that the world will end tomorrow. So we need to just go ahead and find the next dumpster. To be honest, there's a dumpster locator that I found on Google.
Oh my God.
That's toward the end, you know what I mean? We got the independence. That's how the Cuban Revolution, continued forward after the revolution was done. They were establishing things. They took the old American cars and turned them into something. We're gonna take the vines from the threads from people who don't want it and do it. Who's up for looting thrift store anyway?
Yep.
Never eat candy at Kiera's house. So so this is Independence Day, right? It's an aspirational day. One of the 3 celebrations that Black Youth Institute holds on to, in addition to Maroonteen in June, and what we are branding as BYI Day in November. October is a time for us to celebrate World Food Day and to be a part of this tradition and trajectory. I want to talk about just real quick that what we're talking about today is connected to our pathway internally at BYI that we call Black Food Research and Knowledge Creation. It is concerned with, the initiative area is concerned with sovereignty through knowledge production, and that can happen through any ways, right? Writing articles, writing essays, putting out other artistic renderings that offer politics, offer suggestions for how to see the world, mural, whatever. We want to be able to inspire the world, challenge the world, push the world, and help further organize to move toward Black land and food sovereignty. And so this initiative area, I think, is essential when we talk about Black land and food sovereignty, or in general, Black sovereignty, African sovereignty. What that means is being in more control of our lives. What better way than to be able to operate in the world from our orientations, however those orientations show up, and to also force the issue for other people to say, nah, we're not gonna legitimize our work and our worth by how you see the world. We're gonna project what we wanna see, and we're gonna move from that. And if you can't vibe with it, fuck you. And if you can vibe with it, holla at us. Otherwise, it don't matter, we're gonna keep doing that. And so for us, I guess I say that to be more crystallized and to be more intellectual. I'm not gonna take my fucking back, but I'm being both. I'm being EJ and Eric Jackson, serving director of Black Youth Institute. What I think it allows us to do then is to really have some control over the territory of our mind, right? So when we talk about Black land and food sovereignty, the question not only is how do we grow food and build social enterprises and meet our needs, but also how do we project and perpetuate our own traditions, tell our stories, because otherwise people are going to tell our stories for us. They'll benefit from those stories. They'll be extracted from. And so that's our aim with that initiative area. And so a part of that, what we say, Black people, we got to tell our stories, right? In our terms and on our own terms, right? So, and not just telling, stories, I think all living are narratives, right? A collection of narratives. So whether we're talking about political ideas, studying histories and giving analysis to those, photo books, whatever that is, we got to tell our stories. So that's what that comes from. I want to give a history of how we got there, but I want to just do quick introductions to the group that's working on this project. It is largely led by volunteers, and I'm gonna get to that. But we do have one paid person, our research coordinator, Siobhan Terrell, who previously lived in Baltimore, but actually lives in Georgia now. She's been working, I should have had that on the slide, but has started her own consultancy. She is leading the day-to-day work and helping to materialize the project as it was visioned by me, but as it's being implemented by others, all right? So we want to lift her up in this space, and then also lift up, sorry that y'all can't see this, but also lift up the team that's doing the work. Now, there's a group of volunteers who essentially are working because I asked them. I mean, we try our best to have good food, some care packages, some thank yous, but they're largely doing this out of the love for BYI, and I think at some level, just because I asked. I know there's at least one person, one of them in the room right now, at least one person who got 1,001 things on their plate, but they said yes because I asked. And I think that that's important. And so I want to acknowledge real quick the other folks on the team who've been working since the last fall. Last fall, since 2021, to work on this. I want to acknowledge LaWanda Williams. LaWanda is a Circle of Wise Council member, a board member of Black Youth Institute on our research working group or subcommittee, who's doing amazing work, and I appreciate her. Kanav, who is also on our Circle of Wise Council and or board, he is working in the research work group. They both work outside of, Kanav works in the food space with an organization called I always mess this up from the old name, the Maryland Food and Prison Abolition Project. And I forgot to mention LaWanda works at Healthcare for the Homeless. Two of our board members, and we appreciate them for their extended work. There's Kristen Walker, who's a PhD candidate at Morgan State University, who also is a researcher that works at the USDA. We have Nicole Fabricant, Dr. Fab, as she's called. She is a professor, writer, teacher, an organizer out of, out of Elizabeth. But she's working at Towson right now and also does work with South Baltimore Community Land Trust as well. Some environmental justice work and has been connected there. We also have, I always mess her last name up, so I'm not going to do this, Emily, who is a recent graduate of University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And I can tell different stories of everybody for how I asked them to come on board. But people came on board in different ways. I think about it with Emily because she was a student at the time, and she was like, well, I got this project, can you work with me on this? I was like, if you work with me on this, and she was like, okay. Her project is since done, and she's still showing commitment. That's really most people, actually. And then Nicole Bruto, who is a professor, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I got that right? All right.
Yeah.
Professor and researcher working at Johns Hopkins University as well. So I think, a pretty powerful group of people who, even in their own independent powerfulness, come together as a group and have allowed me to ask them to do things and tell them to do things. So thank y'all for allowing that, because what we're getting ready to share couldn't happen without them. And this group has done a lot to plan to get us to where we are, developing data collection tools, shaping up our concept. We had an idea, but largely, and I'll talk about this later, we are creating something that doesn't necessarily exist, that we haven't really seen an example of. And I'll talk about how we got there. And then I also want to acknowledge the folks who got their boots on the ground, folks that we also, are we able to, slide a couple hours, you know what I mean? No, but people who are working on the ground to tap in with community residents or consumers and producers of food in the area, and you'll know why that's significant when I talk about the methodology. But we had Kiera, who's here with us today. Michaela and Quest, all three of them have been working since the summer to collect surveys, to co-facilitate listening sessions, and get on community leaders' nerves to get in front of their people so that we can meet our goals in terms of the sample size that we want. And again, I'll talk about some of that stuff in a minute. So that's the team. That's who's making it happen. So everything that's coming from this, it only happened because of the connections to folks. How did we begin? How did we decide to do this? So I'll share really quickly. In January of 2018, Baltimore City Food Policy Initiative released the 2018 Food Environment Report. It was like the third of its kind, and it was the first report that introduced to Baltimore the language of healthy food priority areas. Probably the most piss poor effort to move toward an equity frame that I've seen in my life. I acknowledge that they tried, but it was like, you go from food deserts to this bullshit? And I was like, something has to be done. Isn't that how all great things happen? Something must be done. And I was like, I said, something must be done. And I was like, how do I do it? It started off with this idea that like this food environment report does something, but it doesn't radicalize the data. It doesn't allow us to see. That's me. Tell Bill Collect. That's probably Scam Light. If it say Eric Jackson, that's Scam Light. A random number? Yeah, fuck it. No, I'm sorry. So, it started with that, right? This idea that there's a need for a research study that looked at food apartheid. That looked at food apartheid. I hadn't seen any that mapped it, that talked about food apartheid, that quantifies the experience of food apartheid. And I don't think that anything's wrong with qualitative studies, and you'll hear that we're doing both. But I think that I haven't seen anything that says, hey, this is what it looks like, mapping it, so forth and so on. And so it was like, yay, let's do it. But then it was like, how do we do it? How do we fund it? And in the spring of 2018, brought together a group of people. And this was the first iteration of starting this study. But at that time, the idea was to study the city of Baltimore and turn the food environment report into a food apartheid report. And not only was that too ambitious, I was geeking. Like geeking. Because it was gonna take so much labor, so much time. It was gonna take a lot. But I didn't realize I was geeking until kind of like halfway through it. It was in it. And so I realized, and then I let us know that collectively we geeking because I was geeking. And it was like, all right, yeah, so let's figure this out. We started again in 2019 with a conversation with Sharon and talking about this idea. And she was like, yay, but what if you just start with a neighborhood? That was the first time I was like, that's doable. That's more fundable and not as labor intensive. And that was around like September or so of 2019. And so we started, I started recruiting at that time, around that time. And early 2020 started the second iteration of this project with a year of thinking about what I learned from the first iteration, asking some of the people who were part of the first iteration to join for the second iteration. We started, had a really solid team of folks, mostly, actually no, at that time, all black people. Some dope people. Dr. Shanti Reese was on the group at that time, and it was exciting, and we were like, yo, we trying to figure this out, and guess what happened? Pandemic hit, and it was like, I'm gonna study it. We're gonna study our asses in the house. And then it was like, what to do? Because we keep starting, we keep stopping, I don't know what to happen. But we were able, at least, to start challenging some of the assumptions that we made in the first iteration. And one of the most powerful things that we did in the first iteration actually was utilizing the conceptual definition put together by National Black Food and Justice Alliance of the term food apartheid and break it down into 5 parts. Y'all know how, like in the Bible, the words of Jesus in red, we kind of put it down in red. And under each of those subcategories or sub-definitions, we defined what things we wanted to measure under that. And so we had at least an idea of what we wanted to study without tools of how we were going to collect that data. Does that make sense? So we were able to kind of, in the second iteration, question the validity of it and think about methods. But we didn't really get that far because we were like maybe 3 months in. And with monthly meetings, that's 3 meetings. It was like, I don't know. So then, post-pandemic, Siobhan and I started talking about it again, and in the fall, like fall, what was it, summer?
Summer?
Yeah, something
we
like
met
that.
here.
Summer,
Yeah, we
fall.
met here. It
You
was
did.
warm. Yeah.
It was warm.
Yeah, so it was either end of spring or early summer of last year, 2021, convening the group that we just talked about to start looking again at what was available and then start thinking very intentionally about the methodology. Great idea, cool, how do we make this happen? And so we actually started developing the tools. We challenged the tools, we questioned the tools, and one important decision that we made as a group at the early time was to decide if we were going to seek approval from an IRB process. We did IRB, for those who don't know, Institutional Review Board. These are bodies at largely at universities that will essentially decide if your study is safe or not for subjects of your study, right? Does it have any glaring ethical challenges, right? Right, questions the ethics, and you need that kind of accountability, right? Does this work, is it not working? We decided to do that, we developed tools, we developed a methodology, or we were developing a methodology in theory, and we started to figure out, all right, how do we make this happen? This is where we move forward to developing timelines, thinking about how we connect with folks, and that's been our process since last year. So we're about a year in, and have this idea that we want to move forward. I want to open up to see if there's any questions or anything. We'll have time for Q&A later also, but any questions, anything I should clarify out there? As a group agreed to do was to perfect a methodology, not perfect in the sense that it's perfect, but to design and to develop out a methodology that could be used across any neighborhood, any jurisdiction, any state, so forth and so on. But to be able to measure what food apartheid looks like from the experience of people and from the data that may already exist, and because it's important to look at assets, right? To map the potentiality for Black land and food sovereignty, the readiness of a community, the assets that exist in the community to move toward Black land and food sovereignty, all right? So we came up with these two research questions. This is how we guided it. How does food apartheid show up in Cherry Hill? And then what assets or resources exist that would move toward Black land and food sovereignty? And the idea, I think, is obvious, but just to be clear, we were like, we want to tell the story and bolster the story of food apartheid and how it shows up using the metrics that we talked about, the 5 parts, right? And not just food desert data, which that's important as well, or food access data, but there are some underlining things that need to be looked at as well that hasn't been measured in other studies. So we wanted to do that, but we also want to find out from the people and from what we know through reading and things like that, where people are, so that when we're done, where the community is and positioned to struggle toward sovereignty, to be able to produce a report that not only says, hey, this is what's happening by the numbers, that can be used for grants moving forward, that can be used for policy change or whatever that might be, but also for sovereignty piece to say, hey, look, we want to organize further, let's get clear about what exists already, right? And have it written, and that was the idea. So the idea was to produce a study, but also change the game so that there is a template for doing this in Park Heights, in Poplarton, in Middle East, Forest Park, wherever folks are like, yo, we want to study our food environment. All right, so that's pretty much the aim of the study. Does that make sense? The methodologies that we chose were, what we call mixed methods, right? So we want to be able to look at qualitative data through community conversations or listening sessions, which we had some here, and some quantitative data collection as well. And, sorry, I did not put it here, I apologize, but part of the community conversation was asset mapping, people identifying what examples of food resources, land, and non-food resources exist in the community right now, assets, including people, specific institutions, businesses, opportunities, but then also looking at, in terms of quantitative data, looking at these surveys from food providers and well, we actually also have surveys here for community as well, based on their own experiences, not only growing up but right now, with access to food and so forth. And then also we have a survey for food providers, and we define food providers in this study as anybody who make food available. They could be shopkeeper, business owners, but they also could be, Miss Ann selling dinners out of her house as well. We don't discriminate in that way. And then also looking at a windshield survey that is more of like an asset map and observational tool. Culturally appropriate food survey matrix, where we look at, we borrowed from this model that was developed out of, I want to say Chicago, I could be wrong with that, but Healthy Food Availability Index. It was also adapted for Baltimore through a study at Johns Hopkins University. And what we decided we wanted to do is a culturally appropriate food index. And essentially this was developed and being developed as a tertiary tool, as a secondary tool. And the reason I say that is because through these community God damn it, I keep turning it on. All right, here we go. So through these community conversations, we were essentially trying to find out what are culturally appropriate foods from your perspective, and then use those answers to then populate what would be as a part of this survey. So this survey with the people who have boots on the ground would then go to see if those foods are available, but it's not like we're superimposing what are culturally appropriate foods. It's both being able to say, these are what we think of culturally appropriate foods, meaning the team, and then here's what the people said as well. Really thought it was a key thing that we all agreed to. And then also, other than collecting data, we also have, we want to look at the data that already exists, from community profiles, from health reports, and from just general like census data to give a general profile of this specific community. So these are the methods and what we talked about. Any questions about methods or aims?
Yeah, can you talk about windshield surveys one more time? What did you say those were?
Windshield surveys as a category. So we got two of them. One that will look at the marketing practices, at a particular store, walking through the community. These are observational tools, right? What do we see when we go to a store, right? It's not specifically looking at food availability, but it's looking at, quality of the actual environment, accessibility. You want to go in and see, hey, do they have ramps for people with different abilities? Is it priced well? Is the pricing clear? Those types of things, and then also walking through the community to figure out, all right, well, are there vacant lots? Are they being dumped upon, and so forth and so on. More so observational tools that will be at the discretion of the note taker, meaning the boots on the ground, Kiara, Quest, and Michaela, to go along with what people are saying as well. Does that make sense? And one thing that I don't have here, unfortunately, that we also added to the study is a soil testing element. People get to decide through the community conversations and through the survey when they are signing to say yes, they give us consent to collect their data, if they also want their soil to be tested. Because the other thing that we want to be able to do in terms of painting an entire picture of the possibility for Black land and food sovereignty in this area is to say what if there's arable land to be grown on or not. So we're going to do that through people's own request, but then also through public land that we know is already open, right? So we'll test that soil and people's private soil as well. Cool. Methods. So where we are now. We've done some of that. Other pieces we haven't gotten to yet because, as you heard, some tools are leaning on another tool to be done, and then also just capacity, right? We don't have a large team of folks. We got 3 people, feet on the ground, and a bunch of other things. And thus the reason why we're giving a progress report right now rather than like, hey, here's what we learned.
Right.
This is what and before I say that, I apologize, I neglected to say that on the last slide. Our goal for this project is 200 consumers / community members to talk to and to glean from, and 20 food providers, right? So 220 people is our sample size, if you will, all right? So they will come through, various forms, and needless to say, well, I won't say needless to say, we have gift cards for respondents or participants as a part of it as well. Cool. I think that's everything for method. I just forgot to say that. So, where we are now. So we've been able to do some listening sessions. We had 4 scheduled. One of them we just partied because nobody showed up. In total, we had about literally the last one nobody showed us. Like shit, I'm done. Yeah, we played games. I forgot about that too. But the first 3 had about 7 unique people come through. And I say unique because we had more than that, but there were other people who came multiple times. They just wanted to come back and have a good time. That motherfucking food was good. Well, they ain't never say that, but I think it was about the food, not the conversation. Yeah, not the conversation, it was the food.
Yeah.
And they knew we had leftovers because ain't nobody show up. But anyway, that's another story. But we also have been engaging in those listening sessions, and since then, in survey participation, we have thus far about 60, and we're continuing outreach to get more folks. So we are roughly at about like a little over, maybe like 30% of the people that we want to talk to. And in terms of talking with food providers, it's just a matter of getting to food providers. Our tool is done. We've identified who we want to talk to. It's just a matter of connecting with them. But again, with our capacity, we're moving at a pace that makes sense for us, and we'll be upping that soon. The hope is that by the end of November, we would have collected all the data that we wish to collect. That is our goal. It's not guaranteed, but that's where we are. And with the observational surveys, that are requiring observation, the culturally appropriate food availability index, the windshield surveys, the second part of asset mapping, those things will happen at our own time. They don't require responses from participants. And that stuff we're hoping, fingers crossed, to be done by November with the goal of producing a report in the first quarter of 2020. That's the aim, that's the goal. Outreach continues by talking directly with community-based organizations, faith institutions, and other actors, if you will, in the Cherry Hill community, that where we are hoping to connect with their people directly to get to our 200 participant goal, and then we'll move from there. Cool. Any questions about that? Anybody want to add anything? I ain't about to give y'all no bar graph or nothing. That was just like just a little progress report. So I want to just share a couple of things. We've so far, in addition to collecting data, I should back up, and I should have said that as a part of our methodology. We broke up our team, our research team, into 3 groups. An admin group, kind of like what we call an admin gang, that folks who are responsible for making sure we got money, making sure that the study flows the way that we say we want to, making sure people are in place, hiring process, so forth and so on. Then we have the data geeks. The data geeks are folks who are looking at the data that already exists, scouring through resources like Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, Baltimore City Health Department's health profile for the Cherry Hill community, looking at census data and other data sets, and they are pretty much just kind of working through, what's already out there, and what are we learning from that, and having it be available. And then we have the big writers, right? No, am I missing? It's 4 groups, right? No, it's 3.
3.
It's 3.
Yeah.
I'm tripping. And then big writers. And the big writers are folks who essentially are working on, they will be largely responsible when the data is collected. I should say that the data geeks will also, once the data is collected, and we will hire someone to synthesize, especially synthesize the quantitative data that already, that we will bring in. We'll have research assistants and others coding that and pulling out the themes. And then the big writers will be writing based on what we collectively come to. But currently, the big writers are finalizing a literature review. What is the data saying, right? I mean, what is the literature saying about food apartheid and black land and food sovereignty? Utilizing some of the stuff that we've already produced to utilize that, to build that literature review. So really excited about that. That's not the only progress that we made in terms of talking to people and getting surveys, but we're also writing literature review, and then the process from there will be getting improved and edited and stuff together. So our hope is come February, March, we'll have an official celebration that we finished this report, and that for me will mean everything, because it's not just about the final product. It'll be about all the lessons learned, because I can tell you right now, hella shit I wouldn't do again. You know what I mean? That's one of the things, at least for me, that I'm appreciative of. The grace that we hold as an institution, recognizing that our pursuit of sovereignty is experimental. We don't gotta have it right. We need to be intentional. We need to be careful, but you ain't gotta have it right. We're figuring it out. Because if liberation as a praxis was perfected, we'd be walking in it, rather than continuing the work that has been passed to us to continue it and try to figure out how to grow it. And so, feeling good about that. I feel real good about that. I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. So, there's a lot of things, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, shit, we have to have the audacity to do that as well. Sister Nika Namdi, the leader of Fight Black Baltimore, says it all the time, that one of the things that black people don't have the ability to do because of resources and because of our lack of privilege in this way is to be able to just kind of experiment, fail, and then build from there. And it's like, nah, fuck it, we just gonna do it. What's somebody gonna say? What they gonna say? And from it, we build something great. It's that whole thing that I talk about all the time. I'm sure that people ain't even tired of hearing it. But the whole 409 formula, 409 only is called 409 because they tried the motherfucking 408 more times, right? But when you got money and privilege and capital, you can try and fail, but that's a part of the process. To perfect something, you gotta fail. I feel good about those failures, and in the report, them motherfuckers will say it. So that when we say the aim is to change the game, you change the game by falling 100 times and getting up 101. And so I feel good about that. I'm excited about it. So I want to share a little from literature review, community profile, some food access data stuff, and food environment quotes, food environment and access quotes from the listening sessions, and then some parts about assets and positive parts as well. We will, as soon as Wednesday, get out this actual presentation as a progress report to everyone. It'll all be there, but in all transparency, I just ain't have time to put it in there. I'm just coming from a conference. So apologize for that, but I'll read it for now. It's part of the literature review. The reality is that major chain supermarkets have been found to have the tendency to not locate in poor black neighborhoods, a pattern conceptualized as supermarket redlining. Baltimore City's 2018 Food Environment Brief, which I just referenced earlier, provides a local example of the implications of supermarket redlining, as the report found that In 2018, 31%, let the church say 31%,
31%.
of black residents in Baltimore lived in a healthy food priority area, which is 3.5 times the rate of Baltimore's white residents. And that's 2018. I imagine that the pandemic shifted that a lot. All right? 3.1% of all black residents in Baltimore is about 130, let's call it close to 140,000 people. Does that make sense? Very interesting. I think I got that number off too. I got that number off. Baltimore is 60-something% black.
63%.
63? So yeah, I'm definitely off like a motherfucker. There's 400 and something thousand black people, so 31% of that number, right?
And Cherryville has what, like 8,000 in the community?
8,000 based on the census, yeah, of residents.
Right.
And I think that there's a distinction between residents and community members, right? But yes, in terms of residents. The literature review goes on to say that the National Black Food and Justice Alliance defines food apartheid as the systematic destruction of black self-determination to control our food, including land, resource theft, and discrimination. A hypersaturation of destructive foods and predatory marketing, and a blatantly discriminatory corporate-controlled food system that results in our communities suffering from some of the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes of all time. This is the definition that we broke down into the 5 to decide what we want to say. All right? This is where we borrow our conceptual definition of food apartheid. As the definition implies, studying food apartheid goes beyond looking at where food retail outlets are located, and instead considers how racism, white supremacy, settler colonialism, and other oppressive systems and institutions are all responsible for creating a food system that fails to meet the needs of all people. And I would just like to add an addition to say fail to meet the needs of black and brown and poor people disproportionately. All right? Exploring how different institutions play a role in our food system brings us closer to understanding the root cause of the disparities that are present. Therefore, helping us make more intentional decisions about how to build a food system that honors all people's wants and needs. All right, it's just a quick excerpt of our literature review as it stands today. Any questions about that? Or anything that stood up to you from that literature review before I go into the community profile and food access stuff?
So 30% you said?
31%.
31%.
31% of
400,000.
Yep.
Right.
31% of black people are living in
Food apartheid.
3 times as many as white people. 3.5
That's
times.
crazy.
Yep.
You know, I wonder too, like the stats in terms of life expectancy in Curtis Bay are 20 years less than in Roland Park. So
Yeah,
I
they're
wonder if it's the same, right?
It's about the same.
It
It's
is, because
69
it's also a
here.
food apartheid area.
Sure. It's about, I think Roland Park is like 81
Yeah,
years.
81 and I think it's 60 something.
It's
right?
69 here.
69.
69. So 11 years, 12 years, 12-year difference. Just a quick personal note to make. My grandmother passed in 2000, at the end of 2000, and at that time the life expectancy was 69. She passed at 69.
Wow.
It's just a way to humanize the data. The numbers say something, but when you live it, it's a little something, a little different. You feel me? Any other reflections, thoughts, questions? Things for us to think about?
the fact that you're so open about sharing your personal life and also how it's affected you. You know,
I appreciate it.
like you said, like bringing to reality, bringing the numbers to reality, really humanizing that experience.
I appreciate that. I think that that's our role, in my opinion, as organizers in denormalizing food apartheid. You know what I mean? We gotta expose it and we gotta be real. And my personal philosophy is, as an organizer, the personal is political. And the political is personal. It's gotta be.
Right.
You know, anything less than that moves forward with European materialism, and that's just not how I want to be. You know, Sister Kiana, we often talk about that. You know, we often talk about the balance of how we do that, but she's very much like, this is my life. So she's not only, I mean, if you don't mind me saying that, just amplifying, she always talks about, if I'm off here, I'm off there. It ain't like, no, I don't get to, you know, she takes a break from the work after much
Right.
nudging, but more importantly, she ain't taking a break from being a black woman in this world. That's what brought her to this. You know, oppression is a lived experience. And the hope for the report is to materialize or to humanize what's happening behind the data. Not just collect data, but what's happening. What are people saying? And let me paint you a picture. Let me talk to you about it. Let me show you the pictures. I don't want to just say when I walk past the pricing wasn't whatever. I want to show you that shit. Because that's how we gonna get real about it. Right? And there is the role of audiovisual media. Right? There's the role of being able to see it. You can talk about that shit all day long. But if we can move away from just talking about it and being able to see a picture, they got moldy green peppers at the store. Or following somebody who's in a walker, trying to get into mobility just to get a couple of things to eat for the next week. Oh, that'll humanize it. Our hope is to be able to show that. Again, won't have too much of that. Won't have too much of that. What we want to do is create a pathway to be able to name it. People can advocate for themselves. So our hope is this tool would be able to get folks to say, like, yeah, we told y'all we needed transportation to the grocery. We told y'all we needed a grocery store. We took it upon ourselves and we doing it. But at the end of the day, like, this is why. This is what the numbers say, and this is what the people say behind the numbers. Anyway, I'm shut.
So I'm thinking also like the work Kiana's doing around the co-op is happening almost at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like illustrating, right, that the solutions are here, even
Sure.
though the city will say it's all about market-based economics, right?
Absolutely.
And so like their excuse essentially for not having supermarkets is to say, well, there's no market essentially, right?
Well, I think-
But like you're illustrating or humanizing the ways in which like people are gonna create their own alternative, right?
And I think that that's an element that has to be lifted up, a profile to be lifted up, especially and particularly in the Cherry Hill community around assets, right?
Right.
Assets come in all forms, aspirational and iterative ones, right? Ones that might not be complete yet, but it's an asset. I think that that's important. And I also would say that like that's what we're dealing with even with the food co-op, right? You want to speak to that in terms of like the market-based stuff and funding and the studies, the market studies and stuff, and all of the BS around that.
So when I was talking to that,
It is
ambassador earlier. Well, so what I was saying is that what Eric was saying earlier about just making it human, like humanizing it. When I worked at Hopkins, it is this level of like, when Hopkins does research, they're not necessarily in the work, they find people who are in the work.
Right.
And then keep that data for themselves.
Right.
And then we get a chance to look at it whenever they get a chance to open it up to us. So.
If they decide to open it
If they
up.
decide to open it up.
Which much of it is closed.
Yes, indeed. So I think when you do the work, because even now, I've said before, I didn't even realize how privileged I was in some regard. Like I remember seeing the story on the news about Cherry Hill and Walmart being taken, and I was just like, what is the big deal? Like drive to another market. Like I don't even like Walmart anyway.
Right.
And now I'm just like, oh, when I come here to Cherry Hill, even working here, I know once I'm here, I can't get nothing fresh.
Right.
Like I know if I'm gonna buy some food, if I'm going to the shopping center,
Yeah.
it's nothing gonna be healthy. It's going to be fried. It's going to be sugary. I already know that going into it. So when I think about like when we doing the work as the board on the Cherry Hill Food Co-op, it's like all of these different pieces and trying to hone in on one piece in a relationship to food. And the market study, it basically just says that essentially it's hard to get a market here. It's hard to build a co-op, and they typically not going to be successful. Like that's literally what the market study is
Even
saying.
cooperatives,
Even
Right.
cooperatives.
specifically. Our market study was to look at the viability
Right.
of a co-op. The
But I
person
love
who wrote
that
this
you
for
guys
us.
are gonna be pushing back and challenging.
No, we are, and that's where Kiana's going.
Right.
I just accentuate that point.
Yeah.
We are collectively, as a network across the nation, pushing back on.
Right.
But I just wanted to accentuate that point
Mhm.
because, like, we're reading it, and the person that we paid $20,000 to write said, "This shit not gonna work,"
Maybe not.
Oh my god. Yeah.
and we're supposed to use that tool to go raise money with.
Oh my god.
Anyway, go- I'm
The
shutting up. I just
irony,
want-
the multiple levels of irony blows
So
me away.
the point in that,
That's
right?
crazy.
So the point in that, though, right, is that to say that the city operates
Right.
along with what the general,
technocrats say,
essentially
right?
what the market says,
Right.
right? So the business model for grocery stores say that if they don't make a lot of money, the population is dense in that particular area, vehicular ownership is low, people don't buy food every week, they only buy when the food stamps come out, that's not a good place to go there, i.e. supermarket redline. So the data is not gonna say that. So
Right.
we're not mad that we paid $20,000 to do that, because you need it. But those types of tools that we have available right now for co-ops
Are
across the
limited.
country
Yeah.
are not working to make our fucking case.
Right.
Because it doesn't consider the assets that we're talking
Exactly.
about. People do buy food.
Facts.
But here's the deal. Here's the deal. It is no difference. It is absolutely no difference than what other people have to do. For example, we talk about Sankara, right? Thomas Sankara, and there was this quote that I like. It's over in our little Hall of Fame walking up. He says, when people ask, well, where is imperialism? He says, look no further than your plate. Your millet, your corn, and all of these things are imported in. That is what we have to do if we want to have good food. We
Right.
bring it from outside of our community and from people that don't mean us well and who benefit from it economically. The point of cooperativizing our resources and doing the legwork to build it is to organize ourselves, to meet our own needs, to bring food in from the places where we want to grow our food and bring it in, and we benefit from it. So
And
when we
to
talk
grow
about
wealth
the
here.
potential
Yeah, absolutely.
of and disrupt some shit.
Yeah.
Because if now I don't have to go
Right.
outside and come in, I done theoretically spent less money at BP and Citgo and all of these other ones. Not only did I do that, I spent less time traveling. Right? That's the idea.
Taking more control.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I want to frame it and couch it that way because I think that that's important. That part right there. Now we are working as a network. In fact, I want to say we generally, and as a representative of Black Youth Institute's interests and Cherry Hill Food Co-op's interests, Kiana is working with a national group of folks to explore what it looks like to get new metrics, so
That's
that
what
we
I was
have,
gonna say, too.
so that we have
Yeah.
tools that actually work for
Work in our
us,
favor.
that think
Yeah.
about assets beyond the market, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The
Supply
capitalist
chain.
market thinking about supply chain. So and I won't go too deep
Because
into
it's a
it.
self-fulfilling prophecy. The city
Literally.
depends upon Hopkins. Hopkins is creating metrics that don't work for the community, and then it
They
feeds
don't.
right back into the
They
city
don't.
apparatus to say, okay, it's a
They
red
don't.
line zone for
But also to be
supermarkets.
clear, we can localize it, which is fine,
Right.
but it is not uncommon. That's what
Right.
folks in Detroit are dealing with, folks in Pittsburgh are dealing with. When it comes down to black co-ops,
Right.
the tools that exist
Are
don't
not
work
effective.
for us. They don't consider our assets.
Right.
They don't consider how we bring culture into it. They don't consider our purchasing habits, our purchasing potential. They don't consider those types of things.
And I think we should thank God that they don't. And the only reason why I say
Yeah,
that,
you
because
know that's real.
I was going towards that, is because then it opens us up to be able to do it ourselves.
Well,
And then
true.
they have to buy it from us.
Exactly.
So when we look at it like that, and that's what cooperation is, because even the Cherry Hill Food Co-op is something that came out of Black
Right.
Youth Institute. It was the community saying, we gotta figure out our own solutions. you can't look for somebody else. That's literally what Black Land and Food Sovereignty is. It's about figuring out your own solutions and saying, and admitting we got some challenges.
Right.
Like, that's what it's about. So, and then also
And you're
using some of
literally
these
creating
systems,
new metrics, which is so cool,
exactly,
right?
and using some of these same systems against them.
Right,
That's just
exactly.
what, that's what
Right.
it's all about. So it really does make the work, it puts more value,
Value,
takes value
yeah.
from us and puts it into the work.
Absolutely.
And then it allows people to use their life as something greater, something beyond them.
Sure.
And then it's something that'll last long term.
Right.
Because the reality is, we understand that Black Land and Food Sovereignty is power, but you need money.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you need that knowledge.
Right.
And we have to be able to store it together
Mhm.
and then teach other people how to do the same thing. And that's where political education comes from. And that's where all these different messages come from. And if you understand that, you can build that across everything.
And that's the part of sovereignty that I want to preach, proselytize, baptize, and all of that for people, because that's the part we don't often think about. What Kiana just described for me is, now I control how I even think about this shit. So now, instead of the narrative that drives, or the cognition that drives brain drain, right? So where the people that go to college and we leave our community, like, yo, I'm self-made, I'm trying to get out the hood. That kind of methodology says, nah, fuck this is ours and we're gonna build. And seeing the value of being in the margins. Being on the margins and being in the margins and being like marginalized people ain't necessarily bad. That means they left you the fuck alone, which means you can build for yourself what you want. And we're doing that.
Mhm.
I'm shutting up because I'm getting
And that's
fired.
one of the things.
come on, you know.
I love when you get fired up.
That's one of the things I thought about, because now that I'm back in Baltimore City,
Yeah.
like I was saying, in Howard County, I'm telling you, between 8 and 12 minutes, I can go to like 8 different markets. Even though you can't walk,
Right.
but I can get anything I want
Mhm.
just from food alone. So when I'm in the Baltimore City, I'm like, the giant near me up the village is trash.
Mhm.
And I've been like, you know what, I'm going back to Howard County to get my food. But then I was thinking, that doesn't serve me if I'm a homeowner.
Right.
See?
It does not
See?
serve me. And if I wasn't doing this work, I really would just drive, because I'm a driver.
Right.
People tell you I go
Yeah.
wherever.
But I think-
it make you think about which one needs to do to affect change.
Exactly.
And what
Cut
can we
that
do
out there.
collectively? Like, it just make me think about that.
Right.
And stuff that you never think about until you have to think about it.
Kiana, do you mind saying it again? There was some noise. No, I'm joking.
She's ready to do it.
I just had a question about like when it comes to like food sovereignty and how that works. And I know we talked about, and I know Kiana was talking about this as well, when it comes to the co-op, is that you sort of have to like write for, you have to like apply for grants, right? And people need to be able
That's
to
one
give you
possible
money.
way, yeah.
Yeah, so that you can sustain it. But I know you also mentioned that somebody was talking about how like co-ops are not effective. So it's just like the people that you're applying for grants are getting information telling you that this is not sustainable or telling that this is not effective.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see like how is that dependence supposed to end when we're applying for, when we have to sort of like apply for grants from like these institutions.
Sure. So a couple things, right? What you said is partially accurate in the sense that we raise money from various places, not just philanthropic institutions. There's also lending institutions that you get loans from and stuff like that. And when we talk about, that's why we're doing the work of changing the frameworks that we use for these type of market studies. That's the sovereignty work in and of itself. It's like your framework don't work for us, we create our own, and not only are we creating our own, when we come to you, you got to put some respect on that name, just like you respect that one. You get what I'm saying? It's like being able to justify saying that long, flowy, blonde hair is great. And then you gotta come in and be like, hey, but my afro too. It's like, nah, fuck that. My afro is here, and fuck you if you don't like it, bitch. I wasn't saying it to you, but you get what I'm saying? It's that. It's like being able to step in and be like, yeah, I mean, yeah, my shit don't look like that. I'm not shitting on that, but this is what it is. That's one part of it, right? And being able to legitimize that. And that work is not happening in silo or in isolation from the funders. The funders know we're doing that. Do you get what I mean? the potential funders in the co-op world know that it's happening because we've talked to them about it and say, this don't work. It's like, bring me something else and we'll do this. And so it's a two-part approach. Black people doing cooperative work across the country, cooperative development, are doing the change of the framework. The funders are like, you put something in my hand, I'll advocate for this across the industry. Does that make sense? The finance industry. So that's part of that. Now to your larger kind of philosophical question of like sovereignty and how are we gonna do that if we gotta borrow money? My short answer is everybody borrows money. Or get money, everybody, including people who are already pretty sovereign, particularly white institutions, whatever. To be sovereign means to take your money when you ain't gotta ask me shit. You get what I'm saying? That's understanding the world of credit. And more importantly, credential, right? Because you can have not so good credit, but you are Steve McIntyre's son from McIntyre and McIntyre Incorporated. And it's like, well, yeah, we'll give you $1 million. It's doing that work to legitimize that, right? If that makes sense. So the issue is not borrowing money from people. The issue is that when I ask for it, you say yes. That's what we're working toward, right? Becoming, I think at some level, it is the nature of where we are. The people who give money happen to be the same people who capitulate the same systems that we're trying to get out of. But in order for us to do that, you gotta make concessions, because you can't be in nobody's fucking basement printing money and think you're gonna build a co-op, because our people don't have it. What we do have is enough to survive if we even have that. So then somebody come to you and be like, hey, you got $1,000 to put into this thing? I mean, you know, it's gonna cost us $1 million. Let me see, $1,000 times, all right, we need 1,000 of us. 1,000 of us ain't got $1,000. And even that ain't $1 million, right? That's 100,000. Yeah, you get what I mean? So my point in saying it is, we ain't doing nothing different than other people do. What we have to do is go in and say, hey, my afro is still legitimate. Now we wanna, from a financial standpoint, go in and be like, yeah, I want money. You get what I mean? That's the work. Everybody borrows. In fact, if we are clear and we're students of history, I'm gonna shut up after this. Independence requires us to borrow money. Where you borrow money from and how much you need to borrow may have something to do with what our perceptions are of our resources and assets and what we can leverage, right? Because there's some cases that you might say, I need to borrow money, when you're like, no, I don't. I can leverage my own skills here, but I do need money for that. It's that work. Everybody does it. Walmart is not Walmart without borrowing money. McDonald's is not McDonald's without borrowing money. The United States of America is not the United States of America without borrowing money. Everybody borrows money. The question is, can you borrow the money? And that's what we're fighting against. And like, borrow the money or be given the money.
Look at Haiti. Haiti denied the chance to borrow money.
Same.
Couldn't borrow money.
And even before being denied the chance, actually made to go into a bullshit deal with France to pay them back for what they lost in the revolution. So, right? So imagine that. And I'm gonna shut up on this after this. Haiti had to fit the bill for them getting themselves free. And the reason why they agreed to that was so that they can be safe, so their lives can be safe and they can build. And we wonder why Haiti is poor today. It's not because Haiti fucked up, it's because the world's fucked up. I gotta pay you for freeing myself. Not, hey France, give me money.
They paid reparations to France.
They paid reparations to France. France said, we won't fuck y'all up if you agree to pay us back for, it was a lengthy period of time, it was like 100 years or some shit. Do you understand that? Do you understand the insidious nature of that? Hey, free nation, imagine this, and I swear I'm done. Imagine that the United States of America agreed after winning, after beating, right? The Revolutionary War against the British. Britain say, you gotta pay us. The United States of America would not be the powerhouse that it is. You feel it? Cherry Hill community profile, there's a lot of stuff. I'll upload it later, but I think a significant thing to mention is that most of the households, just under half, 47%, let's call it 48% of the households in Cherry Hill, I think this is as of 2017, are below 25,000. So when we think about food apartheid and the elements that create food apartheid, namely poverty and anti-blackness and white supremacy, it don't just show up in what's available in community, but also what's not available. If half of the people are making less than $25,000 a year in one household, or 48% of the household, that means that about half of the community is below the poverty line, which means that that's why you can justify a number like that. Y'all ain't buying food anyway. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's a significant point to note. There's also to note that about 15% have salaries over, or have income over $75,000. All right. That's not the only metric.
That's the household, right?
Per household, sorry. Yeah. And it's comparative to other communities in this area and to South Baltimore at large. So I'll share that in the later iteration that gets sent out to the group. It actually says here that it's 58% of the children in Cherry Hill are living below the poverty line. We talk about implications on nutrition, implications on food availability, which means implications for who feeds them. If the USDA feeds you, then you damn sure ain't getting culture from that, right? So we're talking about the implications. When we write the final report, we'll talk about this, but this is where we want to radicalize the data. If 60% of your children have to be fed by WIC, that means that 60% of your children will grow up and raise families that have been indoctrinated by the United States government that actually don't care about you. It came in the form of a social entitlement, but it's going to result in a group of black people who essentially understands a perfect meal as the food pyramid, my chart, or whatever the fuck it's called, my plate. Do you understand? That's politics. Social programs, social politics. Anyway.
I was gonna just add that the poverty line is so low, and that people who are just above it, that means 58% of poverty line.
Are at the poverty line.
That means we're looking at so much more.
Absolutely.
So many more children who are actually struggling, and families that are
Absolutely.
struggling to put food on the table.
Yep. There's a lot of stats here. We can talk about that later, but I think it's important. So when we're talking about food apartheid, we have to be clear that there are other metrics that go into this: race, class, morbidity and mortality rates, things of that nature. Morbidity meaning disease, mortality meaning death. And then there's also a table in terms of looking at the certain stores. There was a study that was done by Morgan State University, the community profile, if you will, around a couple of different things with a hyper focus on food. It was one that we've utilized in the past and has distances from it. There's even some data around how much people are, estimated amount that people are purchased or spending on food in the community and outside of the community. And when I say millions, I mean millions. I mean millions. Let's say we don't have the money to sustain a grocery store. No, we haven't organized our resources. That's why a study like this is important. I want people to be able to look at it and say, God damn, we gave them all that money? $4 million between Walmart, Aldi, Save-A-Lot, Y&J, Pixies, Family Dollar, being able to estimate how much money we're giving away, literally through an extractive model, because don't none of that fucking money come back. They don't even hire from here. Even if they were hiring, it'll be very low in terms of income. And in some cases,
on that, though? How do you get an accurate?
so they estimate. I don't know how accurate it
I'm
was,
just
but I think
curious,
that they
'cause I
used it. Me too. But they used a specific metric. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We couldn't find out how to do it.
Interesting.
But I think that it's interesting. I just did a quick little calculation based on, it was over one store. And I estimated that if it's accurate to say 100 people walks in a carryout every single day with an average amount of, an average spending amount of $20, that means
20.
that $2,000 they made in one
day.
day.
In a few hours, because they don't open up on time.
Right.
In one
Day.
day. Multiply that by,
That's
so by one day times 6 days a week, right? That's $12,000 a week times 52 weeks out of the year.
And that's one store.
That's one
Right.
fucking store.
Right. And you could get really accurate by just looking how many
That's
people
what
are
I'm saying.
entering in.
You
You
literally
can
get
sit
sitting
there
in the car,
That's what
calculating.
I do.
Right.
When I sit out there,
Right.
I look. and
From
I see
this
it.
time it's open to this time. Yeah.
So,
That's
so
awesome.
so I think that that's easy to do, number one. If we question the validity of it, it don't matter.
Right.
We know that
Right,
in
right.
essence
That's the
and
number.
pragmatically,
That's it.
we are putting money into other groups' hands and other companies' hands, whether they be multinational or family-based, and it's leaving our community. That literally is the pattern of maintaining poverty.
And we don't like it. Because when you go, like, I go into the stores, they always complaining about something.
Yep.
They always talking about the food too salty, it's too sweet.
Yep.
The liquor store, they don't like how they treat them. They don't
Yep.
even speak,
The
but
prices,
they still are
other-
going in there. I'm saying the same people. I know you see
'Cause
the
it's
same
it's
people
right here,
every
right?
Saturday, 'cause
Yeah.
it's right there.
Exactly. It's coming
So when we
in.
go ahead, no.
No, I was saying, I was thinking about that, in Dr. Fab, what you were talking about earlier when you were saying that like supermarkets don't like come into the city because there's no market, but I'm like, people need to eat, so there's always a market.
Of course.
People need to survive.
Of course.
So even that sort of mentality
Of course.
is crazy.
And the
It's
data
about-
exists. It's a farce, right? It's a farce. It was the similar mentality that was utilized to justify why women shouldn't go to work, right? People will find anything and use the fucking data to make any case that you want. Our burden of proof, we happen to have the burden of proof of those struggling against it, but it's easy. It's easy. The difference between that, and that's why we talk about liberation and knowledge production, people can say whatever they want. It doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be accurate.
Right.
If nobody's challenging, this is about power. This ain't about data. Data is used to justify based on science, right? Social science, to justify why a particular practice, policy, or program is in place. That's it.
Right.
That's why we gotta do it. You get what I'm saying? We gotta disprove, hey, that's bullshit, create frameworks,
Metrics.
and say, look, based on this, there is no difference. That's why I keep using this word audacity. We gotta have the audacity to be like, yo, I'm not using your framework, I'm using this one.
Right.
That don't work for you, I'm gonna bully you into doing
Even
Right.
science, like, doesn't even always go on accuracy either.
it. Science is
Most
political.
science is used to advance corporate.
Like, you can formulate an experiment to get a certain outcome.
Absolutely.
That's the thing about science. Like,
Totally.
you can manipulate it and make
100%.
anything happen if you needed to.
There's historic and contemporary examples to prove that.
And we have something I think like that's like
Evidence.
accuracy and then like being precise. And it's like you always choose one or the other, but being accurate sometimes isn't the thing that we really go for. And even like to take the MCAT at Johns Hopkins, no one looks for you to be accurate or precise. You just gotta be around that number.
That's the norm.
It's the norm.
Yeah. I want to give a couple of quotes before we finish it out. We had some listening sessions and people said things like, Family Dollar is not a market. I was looking for a grocery store and found a Save-A-Lot. The only item that I found on my grocery list was spinach. And I put it back because I could not find anything else on my list. And when asked the question, one of our survey questions, what foods remind you of Cherry Hill? Somebody said, non-fresh. But there are some positive things. When asked the question, how you would change your food options and access, I think it first starts with education. Having food classes on nutrition first, and then put a big market there because you can have unhealthy food in a big market as well. Right? So a move toward education, it sounds like a political education as well. Why don't we talk about having control, not just in terms of going to somebody else, but having our home? In other words, a co-op of some type that can provide food to our communities at a reasonable price. And then lastly, somebody said, my mother used to take me to the field to pick our own greens and string beans. We got a lot of assets, a lot of stories, a lot of things that people have said. We're learning a lot from the data, from what we're producing and collecting. We got more to do. I'm really excited. We did a lot of, deep diving into some of what we have. But are there any remaining questions, thoughts? A couple more minutes.
I did have one random question. I know you were talking about like the mortality and morbidity. Do we have, was there one for reproduction, or are we looking at reproduction rates, especially like just in women?
I have to look at it. That was just some data points that were pulled for this report, but there's a whole profile around socioeconomic status, around the types of deaths.
Right.
You know what I mean? That
I want to lift up the power of the work and how generationally it will make us greater and better. Going back to you sharing with your family, my mother didn't make it to 45. And the fact that I'm 45 now, I've already surpassed my mother's lifespan. That is huge for me. It's huge for my family. It speaks volumes to that generation and breaking those curses, and those food issues and apartheid and all of those things addressing that he's been talking about in the survey. All of those things addressing because of the knowledge, because of the understanding, because of being empowered in knowledge and in the work, being here means so much more. And my family doesn't even understand what it really means, or what it's truly doing, what it's really offering to them through this. They can't fully encompass what it's meaning for us generationally and things like that. So speaking to the power and the fluidity of what we're doing here is so much more. The impact is so much greater, and I'm grateful, to be in this work, to be a part of the work, to be exposed to the work, and head forward. I'm really, really grateful.
Wait, what's your name?
Eris.
Eris? Yeah, I had sort of a response and also a question as well, because I was thinking about what you were saying. My grandmother died when she was 55, and my mom is 59 right now. And I think about it because my mom is sort of an example of class mobility. She was just very lucky to be able to have enough money to move to the suburbs. But for the rest of my family, that isn't the case. A lot of her siblings died when they were in their 40s. It started with like 7 of them, and now there's 3 of them left. And a lot of my family still lives in urban areas. So it's just even being here and seeing that work is being put towards this movement is so powerful, because when I think talking to my family that still live in urban environments, and when they talk to me about how they don't have access to basic resources, they don't have access to as you said, a supermarket, when I can drive 5 minutes down the street and go to the supermarket. My mom can order as much food as she wants. It's just it's insane, and that just really hit me when you were talking about.
It really means a lot.
Yeah, and I was also just had a general question, because I just want to sort of learn more about what your vision of Black sovereignty is, when you talk about food sovereignty and Black land, and what your goal of liberation is in general when it comes to Black yield. I've only ever heard of land sovereignty, for example, when it comes to indigenous and the land back movement. But for the Black community, I want to know what your vision.
So Teal, what I'm saying, Where should we start?
The 5 years.
We wrote a report. It's on our website. It's called We Got 5 on it. It talks about what we've done over the last 5 years, but it also kind of lays out a little bit of conceptually what BYI is and what we hope to do and how we kind of couch that into these 3 areas. It's like a teaching tool plus like a report. So if you check that out, it's on the website under reports, right, Jordan?
Yeah, it's actually on the front page too, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
is? Okay.
It's at the bottom of the homepage.
You can go there, or you can just go under reports. That's what I would say. And then also, boom, can I do a plug real quick? Can I do a plug real quick?
Can you?
Bam, bam. All right. So, in the first quarter of next year, haven't decided when, got 2 small zines coming out. One on food apartheid, one on black land and food sovereignty. Just teaching tools. They both probably gonna be like, little 40, 50 page, little short joints. We just kind of go into some of the conceptual definitions and how we can understand it. You know what I mean? And the possibilities within it. So in the meantime, I would go there, and then also, I'm open, just highlight it. Cool. Any other thoughts? If you don't have any other thoughts, I'm gonna tell you how you can stay tapped in.
Yeah, I think that for me, one thing that comes up when we talk about all these situations is really the intersectionality of all of it. Even down to like, we talking about a carry-out, what you get in your carry-out, and you get in probably a styrofoam container, you know what I mean? And then that styrofoam container will end up somewhere for the next 100, 200, 300 years. Also, I've been learning a little bit about the negative effects of air pollution in communities and how it lowers IQ levels, and how, I think it was somewhere around here recently, I'm not sure the specific location, but as soon as they got rid of the air pollution, they noticed that the kids in schools, their grades and their IQ and all that just started jumping immediately. So even thinking about that, how that impacts the work that we're doing with land sovereignty and food sovereignty, the air that we breathe and the things that we eat and the ground that we're walking on, and just how many things are stacked against us. So for all y'all participating in this study, man, it really is big and it really is major, because you're talking about literally changing lives. You're talking about literally when somebody waking up in the morning, the way that they're seeing the world is completely affected by the things around them, and we are trying to create opportunities to, like we're saying, with our loved ones, really break generational curses and break generational trauma to live longer, live better. Yeah, man, it's all deep and it's all heavy. So the fact that y'all are committed to this work in the way y'all are, specifically on top of all the things that you all have going on in your regular lives, your personal lives, whatever it may be, it's big, it's major, and never want to lose sight of that in the day-to-day grind of all of this.
Appreciate that. Thank
All right.
you. Really, I agree, and I want to just take a moment to just thank everybody, not only for being here, but for your respective roles in this study and in administrative roles to help supplement and support what happens. I think, and I'm biased, but I think we're doing some magical stuff here that's going to have an impact moving forward. So I want to thank you. You know what I'm saying? We all in this room, those listening, and those who may not be present now, really appreciative. But also just want to say that we want to continue to keep folks updated. This particular progress report will be communicated. I'm going to have Jordan send it out in our newsletter, but also probably before that, Wednesday, to just let folks know. Now, what I want to do is also just like quick plug for our newsletter. So if you're not on our listserv, get on it, because that's how you get important information. And when we do the press release for the report, we're gonna have a big joint come out. We want you to be a part of it. So tap in with us, blackyieldinstitute.org. And if you got any questions about the study or anything, ejackson@blackyieldinstitute.org. I just want to say, Jordan pretty much said it already. We got this like alternative brand that we do call Keepers, right? Keepers of the Flame. So I just want to thank y'all as that, and just remind us to do that. And thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all. Happy Independence Day, y'all.
Yes,
Happy Independence Day. 6th Independence Day. Can we put some music on?